Welcome to Sound Values, powered in part by LSA Burger and Classic of Denton.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in live tonight on DentonRadio.com and on our DentonRadio.com Facebook. We are here in the beautiful Discover Welcome Center and located right on the ever chilly, getting chilly out there, Denton Square. I am sitting here right now with the man, the myth, the legend, Jonny Harmon. How you doing, man?
Doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Hey, man, thanks for coming in tonight. You were going to be on last week, but we moved things around a little bit, and that seems like it actually worked out for everybody, all the parties equally.
It did. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, man. So how you been this week? I know
really good.
It's only Tuesday, but
super busy this time of year, so it's good. I know.
I know. It's already hump day tomorrow. The weeks have just been flying by for me, man, all of a sudden. So, man, I want to kind of get right into the conversation here. We're going to talk, life, love, stress, setbacks, snacks, music, all that fun stuff, man.
All right.
But the first question that I always like to ask everybody is, what is your first musical memory? The first time you heard music or maybe you saw a performance, something that made you say, I want to do that,
Okay. That's going way back. I have a very faint memory of being at a wedding that my dad was playing. And my dad was a drummer.
Okay.
And so I remember being at that wedding, but I can't say that in that moment I was compelled to be a drummer because I was so little that I just remember being kind of knocked out by the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then so later there was probably more musically impactful stuff, but if going back, that's the first time I remember like, oh, cool, drum set, band, lights, all that stuff.
Do you remember maybe how old you were?
Oh, we're talking like four-ish, maybe. Yeah, early.
See, that's mine too. I was 4 or 5 years old, and my parents were watching a Garth Brooks concert.
Okay.
And I remember he just like smashed his guitar and lit it on fire. And like I'm not like the biggest country music fan nowadays, but I just remember as like a 4-year-old being like, that was
you're
awesome.
in at that point.
I wanted whatever that was.
Yeah.
I don't care what it takes to get on a stage. I kind of want to do that right there.
That's awesome.
So that's cool. So, man, you said your dad was a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
That actually works out pretty well.
Yeah, good deal.
The noise is there, So did you grow up in a musical family?
Totally. Yeah, I did. Drums were always around,
of
course. My sister is a really accomplished violinist.
Nice.
I got a little brother that's really musical as well, sings, plays guitar, plays drums. My dad, obviously, there was always instruments around the house. He was a drummer and played a bunch of other instruments as well.
Right on.
My mom sings, just a real creative family, definitely.
There you go, man. Very cool.
But oddly enough, I took a really long way around to the drums. Drums, for me, was a thing that came about in high school.
Okay.
Like 9th grade.
So kind of tell me about, like, were you kind of doing other things and then all of a sudden it just clicked, or what
I was
happened?
doing music.
Okay.
I started like in 5th grade playing the French horn.
Oh, so you
band.
Smart.
And so that was what I went for.
Don't you have to be like a genius to play the French horn or something?
I don't think so. Because I did pretty well with it. I was all right. And excuse me, they did the thing where they bring all the instruments in to school, and they have a guy play them, and then they kind of release, and everybody runs and packs around the one that they like. And so all my buddies were going for the trumpet and drums. And so drums being at the house, I kind of knew what that was about. So to see a guy play a drum wasn't like a real fascinating thing. I've got this master drummer at home. So, this guy kind of like tap, tap, tap on the snare drum. I was like, whatever. And then when he got to the French horn, I was like, that's cool. That's got a really unique sound. And like I said, there's only a few people that went that direction. There's a herd of guys at the trumpet and the drums.
Yeah.
And so I went that direction for like 5th, 6th. It was probably maybe 7th grade. I started to check out trumpet and started to kind of get into jazz a little bit. And then I realized, there's no jazz French horn. But there's all this jazz trumpet. So 7th, 8th grade, I was kind of thinking trumpet and started moving that direction. And then 9th grade, I finally got into the drums and kind of just went crazy.
All right.
So
what is it about jazz where it doesn't have the French horn? I never even thought about that.
There are recordings that guys have used it, but it's always a real unique situation.
Okay, sparingly here and there. Is it just like the
as a
sound
compositional
that it
thing,
creates in a way?
It has such a mellow, round sound to it.
Okay.
That when a guy's writing for a 9-piece ensemble or something, sure, you might see a part written for that. But it's not an instrument that you see guys, shedding rhythm changes over.
Quartet.
Yeah, you're not going to see a guy turn up at a session and like blow over rhythm changes on a French horn.
That's too funny. So you go from French horn, then you said you started playing trumpet a little bit, and then you come to the drums. So by ninth grade, you're a freshman, you're getting in there, and we might have to age you just a little bit so I can kind of understand the music of the time. When did you graduate high school?
This is we'll put it in the 90s.
Okay,
right.
All right.
This is going back. So so it was drumline, big time into drumline stuff back then, and then immediately jumped into drum set stuff and was immediately into playing jazz. My dad would take me to clubs and get me in so I could sit in. That started when I was probably 15, 16. He would take me into places and let me get up on the bandstand and play with some older guys. You know? And so then I did all the high school stuff, all the regional band and all-state jazz and all that stuff through high school, and was like really on that track hardcore.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like, do you know Leland Rooney? That kind of sounds like his story in a way. Like
Same deal?
Yeah, like his dad was, from a musical family, and he just heard his dad, and he started jamming with his dad, and then his dad would take him to clubs, and they kind of played.
You have to have something like that. Somebody's got to get you in.
But so at 15, 16, how are you getting into? Is your dad kind of like,
Dad's going with me,
and they just know your dad? And
yeah, he would either be, if it was on his gig, then I could help him load in, and I'd be there from before anybody showed up, and that was cool. But if it was going to hear somebody else, just some guys that he knew, or and it would be a situation he knew kind of where he could take me, where it would be cool, like, hey, can my son come up and sound terrible for a little while, and guys would be like, absolutely. So in that situation, I think it was a thing where he knew ahead of time, and I kind of know this now. I've got some students that I work with, and I know what places are where it would be cool, where like you could probably get in. And I know there's certain places where it's like, no, let's not bother, because the situation at the door or whatever, like, it's not gonna happen.
Even up here, I can think, and especially nowadays, like, so many places are non-smoking now. It's just a lot more kosher to bring your kid in there and just throw an X on them, and there you go.
There are definitely places here where while I'm loading in, I could say, hey, I got a student that's gonna come by, he's 18, is it cool if and that guy can be like, no, not gonna happen, or sure, we're just gonna X
him up, and there we go.
So my dad was kind of doing that, I think, for me. He knew, like, hey, actually, Wednesday night, so-and-so's playing this place. I bet I could take you down there and you could play a couple. So I'm like,
cool, man.
Let's do it. I'm out late. Order up some food, sit there and drink about 11 Sprites, and then go up and sound terrible on Blue Bossa.
That's what's up.
That was a good time.
A round of Sprites for the kid over here.
Yeah, definitely.
So kind of, I'm interested more about kind of a little bit of your dad's background as well. You said you got this master drummer. He's playing these jazz clubs. He's taking you with you, so the other cats around him have to, like, that's the thing. You can't be like a bad drummer and then bring your kid in to play bad drums too.
No, you got to have some respect. Yeah,
so
if you're gonna
what's
do that.
kind of his background? So are we seeing? Is there like a long line of musicians like going back, like grandparents or anything?
I think he was kind of the first one, unless there's something I'm unaware of. He was the first one. He got into it with like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and stuff. I remember him telling me about seeing Gene Krupa playing in a parade float in, like, maybe it was Macy's Thanksgiving parade or something like that on TV, and here comes Gene Krupa playing a drum solo, and he thought, oh, that's really cool. And so he was a little guy, though, so he started when he was young, and fantastic player. He played with a ton of bands, and when I was coming up, he was with having my sister and my brother and myself. Things had moved to a point where he was playing kind of in Columbus, where I grew up, instead of traveling all over the place. But
which Columbus?
Ohio.
Okay. Because isn't there one in like Georgia, I think?
Yeah, there is. So he was playing. I want to say 6 nights a week, pretty much through a lot of my youth. At a place, just kind of trio, quartet, jazz, and
was that his like job, or did he
had some other jobs later on that were more steady than that, but definitely before me and my brother and sister hit the scene, it was 100% that, and then less and less of that as having a family got more and more serious.
That's cool, man. So you were going to like these jazz clubs. So was there a lot of jazz being played, like jazz records played at your house?
Definitely.
So what was being played around the house? Did mom and dad kind of listen to the same things? Or did they have those different tastes?
No, that's what's cool, and I think that's largely why I sound weird like I do, because my the ingredients in going into my ears as a kid were a pretty cool mixture. My dad had a lot of jazz going on. Both parents are pretty heavy into classical. So there was a lot of good stuff going on, like heavy duty stuff for a little guy to be listening to.
Yeah.
And then mom was real heavy into I don't know what you'd call it, a lot of soft rock, kind of 80s pop and stuff.
Okay.
But really good, solid stuff. that I was hearing. I didn't realize how hip the stuff was that I was listening to when I was younger until I got out. I'm like, oh man, my parents listen to cool stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, man. It's. I told my dad, I was like, the older I get, the cooler you become.
Yeah, definitely. Because you realize there's this. You're born into an era, and there's music in that era that you're going to be aware of, and all that.
Yep.
But then, as a musician, you're responsible to be aware of at least everything else that happened before.
Yeah.
And so, I noticed, especially in dealing with my students now, that like guys that if they're not fed good music into their ears as kids growing up, and then they come to me, as a teenager, wanting lessons.
Yeah.
And I want to mention a guy or talk about a thing, and they're just kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just like, oh man, you have so much background that needs to be filled in. And so then I realized what an advantage I had. Like, wow, okay, so being born when I'm born, I'll get the music that's around then. But then also pretty much say 2-3 decades prior, I was getting as a young guy, right? And then even much further back, if you get into all the classical composers
50s, 60s, 70s, then you can drop all the way back to big band era and
right.
go all the way back even further there. Where you've got your classical, just like you're saying, man.
And I didn't know anything about any of what I was listening to, but having those sounds in my ears later allowed me to, when I would get into a thing, like, okay, I want to hear some string quartet, and I have sounds in my head already of things that I enjoy, and then it's just a matter of finding out, what do you call that stuff? What's the style that I like?
Yeah, man, that's cool. And I've talked to like I said, over the time of doing this show, I've talked to people, and some people are like, oh, my mom listened to this, and my dad, like I remember, like Dad listened to like, Johnny Cash. Mom was listening to Prince, and then you see, you're like, oh, okay. Like I grew up, my mom would play. A lot of Prince. This band called The Cult. Like John Mellencamp. Or John Cougar Mellencamp. Back then. Yeah, and then my dad was listening to Neil Young and Johnny Cash, and then Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett.
Absolutely.
And then I had my 2 older brothers down the hallway who were listening to Bone Thugs and Harmony. So like I could walk from any part of the house and hear different music.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like that's how I grew up too. Is like I could be in the living room and my dad would be listening to a record. I could go into my brother's room, he'd be listening to something.
Yeah.
And I could go like into like the computer room and my mom would be listening to something.
Right.
So there was all this different music surrounding. And that's cool, man. I think that's one of the universal experiences of an era where music became really accessible to a mass populace. You know, it wasn't just, like in the classical era where you just had people getting together in a room and playing because you didn't have the recordings. But once we could record and push that music out, oh, man, I love it.
My room was definitely the Bone Thugs and Harmony. You'd have the different music. I was definitely, at that time, hip-hop.
Oh, yeah.
All the boom-bap stuff is what I was into. But I was hearing everything else. And so then later, as I get into other things, it's like, okay, now I have the patience to dig into this other stuff.
And so hip hop is what got me into jazz too, because I would hear these records, these hip hop records, and I'd be like, what is this? Like,
Same
I
here.
know that they're not playing that. And
Same
then
here.
I'd go look it up and I would find, oh man. And then all of a sudden, like I'm listening to Stan Getz and, and Coltrane, one of the bigger, and then Bill Evans and all these names that I'd never heard before, and I really just started to really enjoy jazz. Can't play really a lick of it, That's why I do what I do, where I sample people's music.
No, hip hop will push you that direction if you go tracking down a sample where a thing came from.
Yeah, man, it's great too. That was like you were talking about Horace. The first time I ever saw Horace play was with Mike and Matt Young. So Mike Lozecki and Matt, and they were up in Pascal's. And I had seen like guys play classical guitar and stuff before, but I had never seen, a trio.
Yeah.
And I had never seen somebody like Horace play just so precisely.
I
and
love
all
in that
over
room
the
because
place.
it's so intimate in there and so quiet, and so he's able to just do this really soft, beautiful stuff.
Yeah, man. So we'll get back to this. I kind of went off on a tangent there for a second.
That's
but,
all right.
So ninth grade, you start playing the drums. You're playing in drumline. You're starting to go into these jazz clubs, hanging out with pops, experiencing that.
Yeah.
Did you play in any of your own groups yourself? Did you kind of just start playing with the other cats who were there at the jazz club that your dad knew? What was kind of the evolution of you kind of starting to play with people and not just learning how to play?
Yeah, okay, so there was a guy, I'm trying to think who the first guys, because when you're starting out, there's a few people that you hook up with and make music together, and that might turn into a band or something.
Yeah.
So there's a guy named Joe Tritzler. Shout out to Joe Tritzler. He's just a freak on the guitar, and he was that way from a super young age. He's just one of those guys. very strange guy. Not strange in the bad. He's a cool dude, but kind of an odd guy. And he had stuff figured out on the guitar at a really young age. I bumped into him. Find out he's got a basement full of gear. He's got this sweet old Ludwig kit in there and a bunch of giant speakers and reel-to-reel recording equipment, all this stuff. So I'm like, oh, we're best friends.
Yeah.
That's how that's going to go. So we started playing music together and recording some stuff, and it was a lot of just kind of Hendrix and Zeppelin and kind of stuff like that. We did some Green Day. What else did we do? We did some Rage Against the Machine, and we kind of made a band in a couple different forms by just kind of adding a bass player to things and just having the trio thing going. Let's see. Then there was another group kind of towards the end of high school that I played in for a while. That was actually a lot of fun. That just lasted a couple years. So not a ton though. I did mostly kind of the school track going through high school.
Very cool.
And my evenings and things were kind of filled with practice and stuff.
Yeah.
You know? I would kind of work on the school stuff and just come home and shed.
Oh yeah.
You know.
I had a cousin who was the quarterback for the high school team, and then at halftime he would go and play his instrument with the band, and then go back and play quarterback after halftime.
I think we had a guy like that. He'd be out marching with his pads and everything.
Yeah.
I always thought that was cool.
Yeah. But that's the one thing, like my stepbrother plays the he's gonna kill me if I get this wrong, so I'm not even gonna say, but he plays an instrument. I think he plays the it's either clarinet or bassoon, man. I think it's the clarinet.
Okay.
But he plays the clarinet up at Purdue, and it's just constant practice.
Yeah.
Constant. Always. So how do you kind of, I mean, were you kind of one of the students where, like, you know, your parents kind of had to be like, John, like, go practice, or did you just came home and you were just ready?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things you have to enjoy practice. There's so much of it that's required to even operate at a basic level of proficiency that if you don't really think it's fun to go camp out for 3 hours and shed, then like it's probably not for you.
Yeah. I mean, me and my buddies used to get out of school in high school and go straight to the buddy's shed, and I'd grab the guitar, the other buddy would grab the bass, and buddy would hit the drums, and we would just kind of rotate around, you know.
And that doesn't go away. That's still like one of my favorite things to do.
Oh yeah,
just
man.
with somebody or a couple people or by myself, like just uninterrupted hours of playing the drums. That's got to be a super fun thing to you. You know? Otherwise, like, there's no way you're gonna practice enough.
Yeah, precisely, man. So I feel, this is my opinion, I feel like drummers have to have cool parents.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, your grandparents must have been pretty cool to let your dad start playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then,
I think you're right.
You know, your parents had to be cool to let you start playing the drums. So did you have like a special room they kind of put you off in where it might be quieter, or was it just like
a little bit?
You know?
But I mean, a drum set in the house is a drum set. There was definitely a basement. So growing up in Ohio, everybody's got basements.
Yeah, you're right.
And so when I moved down here, that was part of the deal. Like, wait a minute, y'all don't have basements?
Yeah.
It's like, well, where do you play drums? You can't play drums up on ground level.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there was a basement, and that was the drum area, and there's a kind of a side room of the basement. And even that, there's, you know, blankets kind of hanging on the walls and carpet and everything. It's still super loud in there. So, I mean, since there's multiple drummers in the house, I would get to experience. I didn't have to wonder what it would be like to be upstairs in the kitchen while somebody's, you know, roaring downstairs. I would hear that. And it's super loud. So, yeah, your parents need to be really cool to put up with that.
Yeah, that's. I was talking to the drummer, a while back, from Hin and the Cox, and I remember asking him, and he was like, yeah, I would agree with that. You know, your parents have to be pretty cool and
definitely
very patient in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Because I had one of the guys from the Ghost Note, Colby, was in here, and he was teaching me just like a few things. You know, I could play a couple little pieces here and there.
He's one of the first guys I met at UNT. One of the first drummer buddies I had.
Yeah, man, he's a great guy. But it's me and my buddies would talk, like, there's just, you know, like, all right, maybe if someone's not that archaic of the guitar, all right, they can get away with it. But if you're playing the drums and they're not on beat, it's like nails on a chalkboard.
It ruins everything. Yeah.
You're like, oh, something's just not right about this whole situation, man.
Yeah.
So you go through high school, you're playing in some bands, you do the school thing, and but you were living in Ohio, man. So where did you go to? Did you move down here to go to school? Or?
Yeah, this is where my story takes a little curve off of the typical path, right? So after high school, I was looking at doing Ohio State University, doing their jazz program and all that. And I was really hesitant about the notion of signing up for a bunch of student loans and all this stuff. And so anyway, I decided I wasn't going to do it right at that moment. I was just going to take a year and kind of hang.
Okay.
And yeah, that turned into like 8 years of like doing other things, you know. So I went and I was working different jobs and really doing what I think most people would say is like kind of the regular thing, you know, regular jobs and doing that. And so after a while, I was just like, you know, fast forward some years, right? And I was just like, well, I'm still pretty much broke. I mean, I'm not like going hungry or anything.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I'm still out here with just a regular sized checking account, regular stuff, you know, but I'm not really happy with anything that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, well, if I'm going to be pretty much not really having a bunch of money, I ought to, you know, do something I like.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of how I ended up being at least in the headspace.
Yeah.
To jump on this. This is actually my dad and stepmom kind of offered me an opportunity to move down here and stay with them.
Okay.
And go to school. And so I was like, yes, I'm ready to do that. That sounds great.
Because I was going to ask, were you gigging at night, like working a 9 to 5 and then gigging later on? Or were you just
not
like,
too much?
Just
I was kind of just like, just kind of working, had the drums out in the garage and just kind of go play. And was really just thinking like, that's not for, you know, everyday life.
How am I
being
supposed to have a career?
Yeah, you got to be serious, you know, and like go to work. So they just kind of lived in the garage. And, and so, you know, my playing had really deteriorated. And I would go out and play a little bit and just sound like trash. Because I wasn't doing it every day. You know what I mean?
And so then what happened when you moved down here? And first of all, what brought your folks down here from Ohio?
Let's see. Well, my stepmom went through UNT as a jazz vocalist.
Okay.
Under Paris Rutherford. And so she had done some other stuff and was coming back to take a job at the university.
All right.
And so my dad was like, they were living in Orlando at the time. My dad said, well, hey, we're moving out to Denton, Texas, of all places. So if you still want to go study with Ed Soph, we're going to live like 5 minutes from there. And so that was the thing that, you know, had been on my mind since I was in high school.
Yeah.
Was North Texas. So he's like, yeah, you come down here and get your degree. I was like, okay, I'm going to. So I came down. Here I am.
Man, who is Ed Soph?
Like, oh, really?
Yeah.
That's okay. So he is the newly retired drum set professor at UNT.
All right.
And so he's definitely a legend. And so awesome. I saw him at a drum set camp at Ohio State University when I was in high school. I went to like a jazz rhythm section camp.
Oh, nice.
And so each rhythm section instrument they had brought in a few guys to workshop with all the kids at the camp.
Very
cool.
So
Ed Soph was one of the guys, and I remember in that camp thinking, he's a really scary guy. I want to go study with him. And hearing, you know, knowing a little bit about the program and some of the guys that had come through and what studying with Ed tends to do to your playing makes it really good. So, so from a young age, I was like, I want to go study with Ed Soph.
Yeah. I mean, my dad graduated from what was then called, it was still called North Texas State. That's when, and I think he graduated in like 1975, 1978, somewhere right around there. And he can still recall the 1 O'Clock Like Jazz Band, you know, and how great that program already was.
Yeah.
I've always kind of wanted to do like my own personal history research on like how did it go from being like this teacher's college to all of a sudden becoming this like immensely.
Yeah, I don't know. It's wild how just over a few decades it morphed into that.
I had this professor. He was one of my music history professors. And he was always so bitter about that new stadium that they built because he was like, you know, we got the greatest football team in the land. That jazz band's total trash, though.
Yeah, that was definitely a hot topic there for a while. Yeah, still, I'm sure.
He was so unhappy. He was a younger guy too, and he would crack me up. I remember he came in one day and he was just like, "So what's this dubstep that I've heard about?"
Oh, that's awesome. You had the answer for him.
Yeah, I raised my
right?
hand. I was like, "Sir, I can explain what you hate." You know. So you moved down here, you just started going to school.
I came down here with like a suitcase and nothing. I didn't have drums or anything. I literally came down here with a suitcase.
And you ended up meeting Colby, am I right?
Yeah, getting ready to audition for Ed, you know, for the music program. Like I said, I came down here like not knowing if I would even get into the program.
Oh, man.
I'm gonna go down there and go for it. So
so this is after you haven't played that often. You're like, my skills have gotten kind of trashy. And then you go down and this guy, Ed Soph, who's a legend, is like, let him in.
I definitely sound like garbage at this point, and I'm just thinking like, well, I can swing.
Yeah.
You know, so he'll have me play something for him, and I'm just going to make sure it swings, and I'm not going to try to do anything too wild.
So what do you mean by I can swing? Like, I'll make it swing, you know? That's I like that terminology.
That's sort of it's almost an intangible. It's really difficult, but it's a thing that, as a teacher, it's a really difficult thing to teach somebody. When you show them how to play a rhythm, when you show them how to just ding, ding, ka-ding, ding, ka-ding on a cymbal, when then they play it, you kind of like, all right, that's either swinging or it ain't.
Okay.
Right? And if it ain't, it's really hard to get somebody to swing if they can't. And so I just knew coming in, like, well, as rusty as my chops might be, I can sit down and play brushes. I can make it swing. I can play tunes. I still know tunes.
Yeah.
And so with regard to that, I'll be fine.
So I think I know what you mean. It's kind of like when you watch, like I'm trying to think, because I'll make beats and I'll have guys who will comment. They'll be like, I like the swing of the hi-hat, you know? And I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure. I just like to take the hi-hats and kind of put them off just a little bit to where it gives it more of this like humanistic type feel. And so it's not hitting right on point, so it doesn't sound so computerized.
Right.
And it kind of makes your head do this right here, like kind of bob and move with those drums in a way.
Well, the simplest way I can describe it would be it's the degree of swing is how much delay are you putting on the second eighth note in a pair of eighth notes.
Okay.
So if you think of eighth notes, just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and those ands, if I delay those by more and more, I'll have more and more swing essentially.
So instead of like it's like a
yes. So the 1 and 2 and becomes 1 and 2 and right by kind of delaying that second beat. And so if you do it a whole lot, you get 1, 2, right?
Okay, very
lot.
cool.
And so what's going to be feeling good for a drummer, what's going to feel good is kind of somewhere in between there, and it's a difficult thing to kind of nail down.
So I actually talked to Colby a lot about that too, and like I asked him, I was like, what even is a ghost note? And like he kind of showed me what it was, and I had never implemented that into my own music before, and I went home and I started doing that right. Like after I talked to Colby that day, I went home and like made one of the best beats ever because I had this like guy who knew what he was talking about tell me like, here's what you do. And I never recognized it was in the details, you know? It was like the swing was in the details.
Oh yeah.
You know, where it's the things that maybe you're not even aware you're hearing it.
No, they're just felt. They're these little nudges on the snare drum. And so check this out. A lot of the time I spent between high school and coming down here, I've spent just kind of digging through crates for snares and bass drums and making beats and flipping samples off of records and all that, right? And so when I listen to the stuff that you're doing, I love it. And I know exactly where that's coming from because there was, in that period of time, there's a lot of days where I just kind of go to work and get paid and go to the record store and get a stack of 75s, a few LPs, and go back and just dig through. And when I would be looking for drum sounds, I'm looking for a good emptied out, clean kick drum. I want a good snare drum, and I want a good hi-hat note with nothing else on it. And then if I can get a soft snare note, if I can find a ghost note on the snare, then I'm off to the races. Then, you know what I mean? Because those ghost notes are so critical. If I can get a soft note and a loud note on the hi-hat and not have to change the velocity of one sample, if I can really have a loud hi-hat and a soft hi-hat, a big fat snare rim shot and a ghost note, and then a big heavy bass drum, that's all I need. I can make any groove that I want.
That's awesome, man. So I was like kind of talking more about on the grooves and stuff. So when I used to work at Kroger when I was 16, and I would sit there all day. Like I always wanted to be a drummer, by the way, but it was too loud. So that's why I said my parents were cool, but I guess they just weren't cool enough, you know. And I would sit there, and even in class, like I would always just kind of be sitting there doing this. But the one thing that was hard for me, and I would mentally try to practice this, was tapping a different beat with my foot than I was doing with my right hand. Yeah. Because when I would play the drums with my buddies, all I could really do was kind of your basic this and then, you know, hit that. But it was like, that's something that's got to take practice. And when all of a sudden did you one day kind of feel like, man, like I've got some extreme control over the rhythms that I'm able to create with the different appendages that I'm playing with. And I mean, really, what is the brain doing when you're doing it? I mean, do you even have to think about it anymore? Like you
do it first, and I think through repetition and practice, you try to get to the point where you're thinking less and less. The goal was that you want to just hear a sound, and it comes out your hands and your feet in time. And so you realize in trying to play that way, when you stumble on something, you trip on an idea, then you realize, oh, I don't have freedom over that rhythm or whatever it is in that scenario. I don't have control of my bass drum hitting with my left hand on such and such beat. And so you kind of think, I need to clean that up because I want to be able to just speak clearly through that and not have to avoid certain rhythmic scenarios because I know I can't play that. And so then that leads you to these books where you're developing independence between your limbs so that you can do not only the rhythm you're talking about with the bass drum, but any rhythm on the bass drum where I can have my right hand do a thing and forget about it. And read a line of music with my right foot and not have that be interrupted.
Man, see, that to me, like, that is like otherworldly. That's like being ambidextrous.
A little bit, yeah. You're working towards that.
Yeah,
the fact that you even have a dominant hand, you immediately in drumming start trying to move away from that. Your weak hand, you give it extra work.
It's both sides of the brain, it seems, have got to be working. And that to me, like, I'm telling you, like, I can remember my brain like hurting. Like, I'd be sitting there in class, like, ignoring the math teacher, like how do they do this, man? Like, how?
A lot of it I actually will sketch out. I will doodle out rhythms a lot of the times if I want to see how a thing.
Okay, that's cool,
well,
man.
What would groups of 5/16 notes look like over a measure of 7/4, and just kind of I'll just doodle it out and then say, and then once you doodle it out once, you can kind of like okay, I get it.
Yeah, Colby was the first person to show me what it looks like when you read music with drums. I had never seen that before.
And that's handy for working things out. You can try two things that don't really line up and kind of lay them over and see how everything would go.
Man, like I said, like, that to me was like the hardest. Like, I was like, I'm just gonna keep playing the guitar.
Yeah,
I'll just
but that's where all the
that.
freedom is tied up. That's how you move from just playing beats to like being able to speak on the instrument. Really, an instrument that's essentially a collection of other instruments just gathered around. You know what I mean? And we're trying to make it like one cohesive voice, and then you also are trying to not be pinned in by like beats that you've learned. You want to just be able to move kind of with the rhythm of the music.
So what happened? What happened after old Ed was like, yeah, come on in, man? Did you play in any of the like orchestras or jazz? Like, what were you doing?
Yeah, I went straight into the jazz thing at UNT. I didn't really do orchestras there. I started out, I think some of the ensembles and things were the first groups that I played in. Just it's tough to break into the lab bands there.
Yeah.
So I do remember coming down here thinking I'm gonna jump into one of the whatever o'clock lab bands. Like, no, you're not. I spent 3 semesters of nothing before I could get into anything. But that whole process is really good too. There's this whole thing of like, if you want to get better at reading big bands, so you can do place higher in the lab band auditions.
Yeah,
you have to make a band so that you can be playing big band every day.
Yeah,
every time you do an audition and you don't get in, it's like, cool, well, here goes another semester of not playing big band every day.
Oh, man.
So as soon as you get into one band, then it's like, cool, all right, now I have an opportunity to like read big band charts 2 days a week with a band. So next semester I can start to. So it's really hard when you're not in any band at all to kind of even get better at it, because how often do you find yourself with 16 other guys to help you work on your stuff,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough to have a band with 3 to 4 people in it and work around schedules.
Exactly.
How are you going to get 16? So that's awesome, man. And so, I mean, obviously, I don't ever like to assume anything, but I feel like you graduated.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yep. I got it. I made it out. I
was interviewing a guy one time. I was like, so you graduated? He's like, oh, no.
Sore spot.
No. We're not gonna talk about that.
I graduated. Yeah, I got out of there.
That's cool, man. And so you were playing, like, what? Did you eventually kind of get into one of the 1 o'clock or one of the o'clocks or whatever?
I ended up in I think the 4 o'clock was the highest one that I ever did.
Cool.
It was in that one a couple times.
Very cool, man. That's awesome. I've got some old. I had a friend. She brought me like these old tapes that she found that said 1 o'clock lab band. She found like 4 of them just like hanging out like somewhere. I don't know. I actually still have them, and so every once in a while I'll put those things in and just listen
burning.
to them. Oh yeah,
every year. That's what's crazy. It's not like that band recently got good. It's go back decades.
It's been good for so long, man. So then you graduate, man, and so then what was the next step? What's the next move? I mean, like, you've had, you did some moving, you've played in a lot of different stuff, Sounds like a very full life thus far, my man.
Yeah, so when I graduated, I had already started, I was already working doing some freelance work, subbing with a bunch of bands, and so I guess initially upon graduation, I was looking to just manage to get by exclusively doing this and not have to like go work at Walgreens or whatever the alternative was going to be. So I was just trying to hustle and just kind of fill my calendar with stuff so I could like get by, and I quickly realized you can do that, and I did that. I've had my schedule packed.
So how did you do it, man? How did you do it? I'm curious. How did you not end up at Walgreens? Sorry,
at
Walgreens.
Well, part of it is like, you've got to be very I came into it with a bunch of people that I knew that would start calling me. It's really about having some people that will call you to sub for some stuff. It literally starts like that.
Yeah.
You need some guys that when they're double booked or when somebody throws them a gig and they got to say no, that they'll call you or at least throw your name to somebody.
Yeah.
And so that can be as simple as telling some people like, hey, man, I'm looking to pick up work. If you go to the guys that are working all the time.
Yeah.
And say, hey, man, I'm looking to pick up work. If you have to pass on anything, pass it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that can work out pretty well. And then before you know it, some guys are going to move on to other things, or they'll move out of the city. That happened a couple times where I ended up with a regular gig that I just started subbing on.
Nice.
And then a guy moves away. Just with Connor leaving, when Connor moved, Connor Kent.
Yeah.
When he just moved to New York, there was like several opportunities right there I just jumped into when he took off, just, from subbing on stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's about that. I think in Dallas, if you can have some situation where on Saturday nights you're going out and playing somewhere at a private party or a wedding, that helps a bunch. And then for me, I do some teaching. I got about a dozen students that I work with. So it's kind of a balance. You end up kind of your income, it comes from a bunch of different sources.
Yeah.
But you can, if you stay on top of it, stay busy.
Yeah, it can be like, that was something that I've talked to recently with some of the guys who are younger than me, because I'm 30 years old. I started making beats when I was 23. So it took 7 years to get to a point. Like I have a job that I do from 9 to 5 that I went to school for and all that stuff. But I will play gigs Wednesday, Thursday, I don't care when it is. I'm gonna play it no matter what. And unless it's like so far away to where I'm like, that's not really, I'm going. Right. And it's gonna happen. And that's kind of like what you've said. I was like, hey, if you can't play that, like I can, I know how to mix and stuff like that. And I had people who were like, oh, hey, the guy who usually plays our house parties can't make it. Can you tonight? It's funny how these little house parties that I would play for like fraternities and just apartments up there started to turn into something more just by the connections that
There's
you
always
make.
somebody that's there that's going to be like, man, would you do this other thing I've got? I would love to have. Every time it's almost guaranteed
so it's
to happen.
like, did you ever find that maybe just going to those gigs was almost as important, or like going and seeing people play?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The networking part of it, so that people actually know you exist.
Yeah, there's something to be said for like the gig that you want to have.
Go to that gig.
It. Yeah, go to it and be there all the time.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I've a couple of my buddies now, I never would have known these guys if they hadn't showed up to the weekly thing we do at Backyard on Bell, Breakfast and Beats. Like, I never would have met these guys most likely, and now they're like some of my best friends. They play, at least twice a week over there now, because it's like, hey, can y'all do this? Can y'all do this? So that's awesome, man. Like, I love the connections that come from music and the friendships that can develop, and just like all the it feels like all of a sudden you just kind of wake up one day and you're like, oh, I think I did it. I think I pulled this off.
Yeah, you're like, I'm out here doing it. Okay.
I don't even know how this happened.
Right, exactly.
Like I was working those jobs back in Ohio. Now I'm down here doing what I love all the time, man. Yeah. So that's what's really inspirational about it, man. And that's that was one reason I wanted to have you on, because I had I asked some people. I asked hey, I was like, yo, what does everybody do in this band? And she was like, well, he just plays drums, he just does this, he does this. A lot of those guys are straight musicians. Yeah. Like Mike. Like, how do you do Mike that? Was like, I just play bass, man. And Matt Young, he's like this. I do this. Yeah. And
the thing is, you have to be okay with that, meaning you have a pretty wild schedule sometimes. Yeah, there are really late rehearsals, just stupid late gigs that are just way too far away. Mm-hmm. You've got to be okay with being kind of broke. You know, you got it. There's things that go along with that. But for me, I love it so much that those things I'm just like, yeah, whatever. I don't mind. Like I said, I never had any money anyway when I was doing things the correct way. So I'm having a much better time now.
I hear you on that. That was how my pops always say, he's like, you always figured out how to do it your own way. Yeah. I tried to put you on the safe, straight path.
Though. I think that's really cool.
Then you just do it like this. Well, that's what I love, man, is when you see people who turn a passion into what they get paid for. Yeah. Yeah. It's a silly saying, but if you love what you do, you're not working. Yeah. You're doing what you love already, man. So if you had to give, I feel like you've given a lot of great insight on that, man. But if you had to talk to a kid who's 20 years old, 18 years old, he's growing up, becoming this individual. She, they want to start playing some drums and getting more gigs and doing things and trying to do what you're doing. What are some of the core rules or some advice that you would give to those kids?
Well, the first thing I would probably talk about is all those kind of sacrifices I just mentioned. You're going to have to, if you really want to do this and have this be your gig, not like a side thing, then there's a lot of stuff that's going to be instantly more difficult or more of a hassle.
Yeah.
There's going to be annoyances that go along with it. So you need to like really love it and be convinced that you can't see yourself really doing anything else.
Okay.
And then the other thing I would say is you got to get in the practice room, because I always hear everybody's got tips and advice on what to do in terms of, your social media presence or networking or what gig to turn up to. And it's like, well, you can do all of those things correctly. And if you don't have it together when you sit down to play, that can sink several months worth of solid, networking and social media, this and that. Like if you go out and play and sound like trash, like, man, it's hard to
build
it back.
back.
Yeah. So to a certain extent, it's like you've got to make sure you got your stuff together. There's way too many really good players around to think that you're going to, play mediocre, but then like network or social media your way to a busy calendar full of stuff, exciting projects. Like it's not going to happen.
Like I said, man, I mean, it took 6 years of one of my best friends telling me like, this is garbage. This is garbage. This is garbage. This is
your
garbage.
best friend.
This
you
is
need somebody
garbage.
to do that. Yeah.
And then finally one day he was like, yo, man, I like that EP you put out. And I was like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And then he was like, yeah, you should do some more stuff like that. And then I didn't. And now he you got those friends who actually enjoy coming to the shows.
Yeah.
Now felt
Ed
bad for them.
is really good for that in lessons with Ed Soph, because he doesn't constantly tell you sound like trash or any of the typical hyperbolic statements. It's not like that, but he definitely doesn't just shower you with praise just to give you like a weekly encouragement. He'll never just be like, yeah, man, that sounds great, unless you just really did something that impressed him. So after it was probably 2, or maybe it might have been my 3rd year of lessons with him, I did something one time and he was like, yeah, man, swinging. I was just like knocked me out of my seat, because I love it. Up to that point, all I would hope for is that I would just go in and he wouldn't say anything was bad. That was like great. If I just played something and he'd be like, cool, next. It always that was a win.
It always seems like the guys who are at the top, like that's like if you're playing for them, you're just waiting. Like there's this story. Have you ever heard of a group called Atmosphere, hip hop group?
Atmosphere.
They were out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They're out of Minnesota. Well, there's their producer, the guy who makes all their beats, is in like the beat making realm of music is like a god. You know what I mean? This guy's amazing. And there's a rapper who was with him, and he tells a very similar story like you do. And he's sitting there, and he's like, yeah, I show up. He goes, so I show up to Ant's house. There's like 15 kids running around. I don't know what's going on. We go down in this basement. He's got all these records everywhere, and we sit down. He goes, I go in the booth, and I just threw out the lyrics. And he was like, every time I went there, I was just hoping he wouldn't tell me I was awful. He goes,
these guys are saying, turn it up,
turn
it up.
Hold on. He goes, and then one day all of a sudden I got out of the booth, and he just looks at me and goes, yeah, it's pretty tight. And he was like, oh, he's
that
like,
was
right
victory.
there.
That's
right
victory
there.
in that
I knew
moment.
it. Yeah. So I love it. And I'm going to start using that term, swing it a little bit more. Like, man, just swing it. Swing it, Maybe that's what I was trying to do with my hi-hats last night. Just get a little bit more swing going
Maybe,
on.
yeah.
Who knows? I worked on this hi-hat thing for 20 minutes last night, just like, come on, man, we can find it.
The hi-hats are where it's all locked up. That's where everything happens, is in
so
hats.
That was gonna be like one of the last questions, man, before we start to wrap this up, is where's the importance? Where's the groove come from?
It's in the hats, man. I think it's in the hats.
Yeah, when I've watched Joe James play too, like that man can work the hi-hats, man. So what is it about that part of the drums, man? What gives it that authority?
I think it's because the hi-hat is what fleshes out what happens in between your kick and your snare, right? And so a lot of times, at least in hip-hop and like groove-based drumming as well, the snare is kind of, we know what's going to happen with the snare. It needs to be on 2 and 4, right? And so there might be extra things that happen, but pretty much the snare is on 2 and 4. Kick drum is probably some kind of a downbeat phrase or some repetitive pattern. And so the unwritten stuff, the stuff that's kind of up to you, is the hi-hat. And it's not, I don't only mean adding a bunch of extra stuff. I mean also just the interpretation of like the placement of the notes, even if it's just eighth notes on the hats. Like the way that you lay them, the way they relate to the snare and the kick, I think can change the feel so much. Yeah, man. I mean, it can change the era of hip hop. Yeah. You change the hats on a hip hop groove, and all of a sudden, whoa, we just moved 10 years. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, if you
all of a sudden it's a triplet grid in 1/30 seconds. It's trap music now.
Yeah, exactly. In the same way that a snare
But-
sound, you can change the snare sound
Uh-huh.
and move a thing a decade also.
Yeah.
You can change the hi-hat feel
like the boom bap.
and shift a thing.
So, man, one other question I have. We're getting close to the end here. We got 5 minutes left.
Okay.
But I kind of meant to say this, and then we started talking about other stuff. What was it initially, besides, your dad playing those jazz clubs? Because a lot of the time, young people, we kind of steer away from what our parents do. What was it that kind of brought you back to those jazz roots?
Probably my love for that music. I got into that music and never really stopped loving that music. Even when I was doing other things, I would always still kind of go back to that. And even in messing with hip-hop beats and samples and all that, I would go back to those same kind of records to pull samples from and everything. So I always loved it and always loved the drums, so it's kind of a natural overlap of the two.
Cool, man. That's what's up. Like I said, I didn't really like or really even understand. I guess it's not that I didn't understand jazz until I actually moved up to Denton, started taking these music history classes when I was 24, 25, and started going and watching the concerts that you had to go watch, and you had to write about them.
Yeah.
And I can remember the first time I heard a guy play John Climmer. The song goes, it's like da 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 da. It's like a saxophone or something, and I was just like, "Ooh, I want to sample that." and it's like, so I figured out where the track was from, because inside the pamphlets, they tell you what that's from, and that was when I realized like how I could translate those back and forth, and then just how good those guys were at playing an instrument.
Yeah.
Like
I remember that was your inroad.
Yep.
Into jazz. Everybody kind of has their own little different way to get in.
That was my way.
But once you're in, then you're kind of hooked.
Yeah. Like, I can't even listen to rock. I can't listen to new rock music anymore.
No.
I'm just like, there's no swing, baby. There's no swing in here.
It's got to swing.
So last question I've got for you, man.
Sure.
And this is one of the most important ones I can possibly ask, is what is your favorite snack? What is your snack of choice?
Oh, man, you did say we were going to talk about snacks.
Yeah,
right.
What is your snack of choice?
Oh, man, I like to try to not snack too much.
I
like to try to keep my fitness together.
Yeah, I feel that.
So I like a guilt-free snack. I'm going to go with nuts.
Dude, I was literally writing down almonds before you.
Yeah. I'm going to go with nuts. I like the mixed nuts. I'm going to go with, let's just do like roasted, lightly salted.
There you go.
Nuts.
Yeah,
right?
man.
Guilt-free, and you can just eat them, eat a million of them.
Yep. Ain't got to worry about it. Yeah, man. I'm like, it's very similar. Like, I'll get to work, and the guys will be like, we do the intermittent fasting thing, and they'll be like, hey, man, like, just give me a handful of mixed nuts. I'm dying right now.
Yeah. It'll keep you going.
All right,
it
cool.
will. Yeah.
I'm good to go.
Can I shout out a couple things coming up that we've got coming?
Please,
so there's,
please.
what do I have going on? November 18th. Tomcat is playing at Oaktopia, opening up for Fantagram and a couple other
nice. That's right. And y'all just released an album.
Album is out.
Yeah.
It's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's on Apple Music. All that stuff. Let's see. We have November 2nd, I believe. There's a show in Deep Ellum. I forget the name of it. Women in the Arts, DFW Women in the Arts, something like that. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of bands playing at Drugstore Cowboy. November 2nd, I'm playing in
Played there on Wednesday,
a bunch.
brother.
Did you?
Yeah.
So I'm going to be doing like a tap dancing thing of like trying to play a mini set with like, I think it's 5 different bands.
Wow.
On the 2nd. So if anybody likes to listen to me play the drums, that'd be a good night.
Yeah.
A bunch of the group. So I realized on that bill that most of the stuff that I'm involved with is women-led projects, which is
nice.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Playing a lot of fun music.
Carly Reese, all those girls.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else is coming up.
Yeah,
I think it's. I'm probably forgetting something, but I wanted to mention.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, man. Is like we could have probably had another 30, 45 minutes of this interview, because I was like, I can still go, because we haven't made it to the now. We hadn't made it to where we're at now.
Yeah,
but
which is out of control.
I know, but that's what I like to hear, man. I mean, you're staying busy, you're working hard. The dream is alive and well, man. And so, Jonny, man, Mr. Sweet Sticks, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, man.
For coming out, man. It's been an awesome conversation.
Pleased to be here.
Great stuff. I'm actually gonna check out like Ed and I think Paris Rutherford is another name I wrote down here.
Okay, yeah, very cool.
And you never know. Maybe I'll find Joe Twitchler on Facebook. And
Twitchler, T-R, yeah.
Twitchler, there we go.
I
We'll
like
fix that
Twitchler, though.
Yeah, Twitchler. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again so much for coming out,
Pleasure's
man.
mine. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking to, we won't throw the nickname in there, but Jonny Harmon tonight, folks.
Twitter handle.
We appreciate you. Another big shout out to our sponsors, LSA Burger Company, for keeping the show alive. You guys make sure to stick around. We got Ellie Bell, and then next week I've got Leon Carlo coming on the show. Real excited to talk to him. You guys stick around, stay cool, and stay warm right here on DentonRadio.com.
Well, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to check out DentonRadio.com for new Denton artists and where they're playing next. While you're surfing the internet, make sure you check out our friends Classic of Denton at ClassicofDenton.com.